Hello and welcome to the 2021 Drunch. I am a art gallery owner trying to pose as a host today on this Zoom call with Phil Starke. Phil has an amazing story that is going to be very entertaining to listen to, and we're going to talk a little bit about art and talk about Phil's journey around the country and chasing light through the USA, so to speak. No one wants to listen to the gallery owner talk too much, so Phil, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Phil is joining us from Georgia. He's been on the road recently, and we'll let him touch on that. And for those who aren't familiar with Phil Starke started out of the great state of Missouri, where our son is now a football player and golfer up there and college student, and met his lovely bride in a neighboring town. The rivals met, and Phil and Sherry met, and they've been happily married ever since with a wonderful family. So it's kind of ironic that all this Grapevine and Missouri stuff came back together with their families and with everything that's going on. So it's been a fun story.
Small world.
But it is. So, but anyway, Phil's been with the Grapevines pretty well since Julie and I have, since the mid 90s. And we've shared many shows and adventures together. And so Phil's as close to family as it gets as a Grapevine gallery artist. And I'll quit talking so much, but Phil, toss one up to you here real quick. Why don't you let everybody know what initially got you into wanting to be an oil painter and fine artist?
Well, initially I have a great uncle that went to art school back in the teens, 1917. He went to World War I, got gassed, that whole bit. It's a horrible time for him, but he went to art school at night, and his life drawing teacher, figure drawing teacher, was Oscar Burninghouse. And so he was an artist who went to, again, art school about 1919, 1920, and was a commercial artist in St. Louis till about the 30s. And the family farm went bust, so he had to go back to help, and as a result, never really got back to his art again. But I was fortunate enough to, he lived to be about 96. So I was fortunate enough as a teenager to get to know him. And he would talk to me about Oscar Burninghouse, one of the founding Taos members, and show me his work and talk about what Oscar would say in these classes. So that got me going art-wise. Plus we lived in Europe for 3 years. My dad was in the military. So that also stirred up a lot of interest in art. So after high school, I went to state college, took some art classes, eventually got married, and moved to Chicago, where I attended the American Academy of Art, which is a really good art school, and took painting there for about 3 years. And that's how things kind of got rolling. But my relationship with my great uncle was probably biggest influence. And,
that's outstanding. And I also understand not only did you learn how to become an artist in Chicago, but you also learned how to carry a pizza in Chicago.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah. Did Sherry tell you that? Is it?
Yeah. Sorry to throw you under the bus, but until he went up there and got a deep dish, he learned to carry it flat and not straight up and down. So
I thought it was like a book. You could just
it's one of my favorite stories. Sorry to throw you under the bus. Well, let's touch a little bit before we get into the slideshow. For those who joined us with Kim and Cammie's broadcast, we went into a bit of a slideshow, and we want everyone to know that on the website, you can easily go to the Grapevine Gallery's website, grapevinegalleryokc.com, and Phil's got an amazing website as well that his lovely bride Sherry maintains for him. But when we do these slideshows, we're trying to get in a little tighter for those who can't get into the gallery, can't get into the studio, to really get a good look at the brush strokes and get a full sense of what the painting looks like, as well as they possibly can in person. So one of the topics Phil and I would like to bring to light today, no pun intended, no dad jokes meant, is Phil has a very interesting and unique perspective on light in the USA. light changes from one demographic to the other as you travel. And Phil, from going to school in Chicago, living in Missouri, living in Arizona, living in Georgia, having family in New York City, Phil has literally chased light all over the country. He's a fantastic workshop teacher as well. So Phil, would you like to touch a little bit about the light in America and, you know, kind of what you've seen as you've traveled and you've painted?
Yeah. Well, it helps to focus on one thing when you paint, especially if you're outside. There's so much material before you, details and stuff, and a lot of it doesn't matter in the painting. So it helps to focus on one. The most important thing is light, because that's what shows the form of mountains, trees, figures. And the light also is what gives us the color. So light's the most important, because that gives us the colors we see based on the color wheel. And it also gives us the form. You know, things aren't flat looking because of the light. So it helps to simplify what I'm looking at by reducing everything to what the light is doing. So if I can capture what the light is doing on a tree, I don't have to paint a relief. I can capture the big shapes and values based on the light. And I think that has more of an emotional impact on the viewer than a ton of detail. When I get caught up in too much detail, my painting tends to look photographic. And I think that kind of deadens, really deadens your painting. So simplifying, focusing on light, specifically light temperature, warm and cool. So it's a real quick view of what the light is. And I don't know, not unique with me, because that's what everybody's taught in art school, is to paint what the light's doing. Just some artists understand it and get it better maybe than others. But yeah, if I can reduce things to just what light is doing, I think there's more emotional impact there than focusing on detail.
Before we go into the slideshow, just to kind of put the icing on the cake as we're talking about light in fine art paintings, one compliment that artists give other artists is something being very painterly. Sorry, I told you I wouldn't throw you a curveball, but you kind of inspired me with your answer there. But with an artist talking about another artist doing a good job and something not being too photographic, maybe you could share with the viewers and other collectors and art students that compliment of a piece being very painterly, and what does that really mean?
Again, it kind of goes back to the idea of simplifying. So, like a painterly painting, generally speaking, has bigger brush strokes. The smaller the brush strokes, the more tighter the image of the painting ends up. So I tend to use bigger brushes and try to capture, again, the light with as big a shape as possible. So if I have a tree with 5 or 6 shapes on it, different values, the bigger the brush and the more simple the brush stroke, the more painterly it's going to look. And the idea too of pushing your darks thinner and building up your lights really thick gives it also that painterly look, as well as some depth between the thick and thin paint.
Is that pretty common to look for that? You know, when light is changing all the time. Is that something when you're trying to capture something in plein air that you try to focus on a piece to make it more painterly than make it a more of a finished painting?
Right. Plus, you don't have much time to be more finished outside anyway. So the outdoor work tends to look more painterly. The struggle in the studio is to capture that same feeling. So it's a lot harder, but I consider outdoor painting totally different from studio painting. I don't expect my outdoor paintings to look like the studio painting. Again, because outside is a bit more spontaneous. You're capturing a moment kind of quickly. Where indoor, I can focus more on design, maybe more color variation, where you can't do that necessarily outside because there's just not enough time. So even though I consider outdoor just as much a finished painting as indoors, there's still two different styles of painting, you might say.
Well, I like both styles that you produce, and both of them are fantastic. So I will start by saying I'm about to try to share a screen. I've got a PowerPoint set up for Phil, and hopefully this works, and we'll go from there. So I will do the share screen here real quick, and hopefully this works, and we get it all going. So here we go. So here is, I think we have Phil up in the top right corner, and I'm trying to do the best job I can, imitating myself as a presenter here. But anyway, if it's not the perfect image and it's a little rough and choppy, I apologize. But anyway, this first piece, Blue Ridge Autumn, it's a 20 by 30. And Phil, why don't you walk us through this piece, and let's talk about some of the topics we talked about before with this piece.
Yeah, Sherry and I recently moved to Georgia from Tucson. So it's a new subject matter for me, and I really like it. I still go back and forth to the Southwest and West to paint quite a bit. But so I'm getting used to Georgia, which is very green. This is an autumn scene. And I've been spending the last year up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is about 20 minutes from us. Just getting there early in the morning, spending a couple of days. Because to capture the light, early morning, late afternoon is the best time for painting / photographs. Because the light is low, there's more dark and light contrast. You can see the form better. Midday is a little flat. So this is early morning in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a place called Clayton, Georgia, which is kind of where I'm going right now. I'll exhaust everything in Clayton over the next few weeks. Or I've pretty much done with Clayton now. This is last fall.
Well, don't ever give up on Clayton. There's a guy named Clay. Don't ever give up on Clayton.
Well, it's closest to me, so that's kind of where it started. But it's beautiful, beautiful area. Obviously the Southwest and the West is more dramatic, but the hills are nice and subtle, nice forms, a lot of trees, a lot more trees than Tucson. So I'm liking that. And I'm learning about green again, because this, everything there is so green. Even in the autumn, there's a ton of green. So, but this is early morning. This is near a farm where some horses were scattered around. And I did a couple of little 4x5, 6x8 color studies, and took some references with the camera, and then did this back in the studio. And the studio is where I can redesign things, create a better composition. So this is a studio piece.
Well, can you share just briefly, there's the horse obviously that will draw someone's eye there, but when you created this piece with the composition, with these fall colors, with the browns as the leaves are starting to change, and the focal point of the tree that's just right of the road and the path there, with the shadows casting, can you take the viewers through just briefly how, when an artist creates a piece like this, they can use the hills for depth and the clouds, and they can use those warms and cool colors to kind of show the foreground versus the depth? Because this piece is simply fantastic in the light and the depth. That's why I chose to start us off with this one.
Yeah, compositionally, I'm always looking for things that will work somewhat compositionally. And then in the studio, I can redesign it. So in this one, what I do is I look for lines. So the line of the road, which is created by the bushes and the road coming together, it creates a line, or even the line of the fence, even though the fence is broken up. The viewer's eye still follows that line to the big trees you might look at the horse first because that's probably the focal point, but then your eye goes back to the large masses of the trees. And from there, it follows the line of the clouds down to the tree on the right. And that pushes the eye back to the shadow that's on the hill in the middle ground. And that brings you back to the foreground. So I'm looking, this is more of a circular composition, somewhat designed. I mean, a lot of it was there, but I'm using the clouds to kind of pull the viewer's eye back to the right and then back down to the fence. So ideally, you want the viewer to kind of enter the picture at the bottom, move around, follow lines or shapes that create lines.
Well, and I think that it's just I think it's masterfully done, Phil. I think you did a beautiful job because those shapes do keep that. And I'm talking with my hands. I don't know if I'm being recorded or it's just my screen. I'm kind of a novice at the hosting thing here, so everybody can have a good laugh at me. But if you can't see me, I'm talking with my hands like crazy. But just to echo what Phil said, these shapes and these light and cool colors. A lot of people say, well, I like this piece, but I don't know why I like it. Well, there's a reason why people like the piece they like, because the artists go out and they find these shapes, and then they'll do some things with the creative freedom that the artist has to work on a shadow here or work on a cloud there. So as we go through the slideshow today, hopefully we're able to work with these shapes and lines and shadows and lights and help everybody have a better understanding. Like you said, this is an area that's very beautiful. It's got a lot of amazing scenery, but kind of when you're approaching these as an artist, what you're really looking for. I think that would help the viewers and collectors understand why an artist chooses the scene that they choose.
I'm trying to stay pretty true to what's there, but at the same time, we're not cameras. So I feel free to tweak things, push the size a bit bigger or smaller if it helps the composition, stretch things out a little bit. But looking for those lines and the patterns of dark and light is what you're working with compositionally.
Well, it's an outstanding
color as well, the temperature of the color.
Well, it's an outstanding piece, Phil. You absolutely nailed that one. So well, let's check out the next one here. We have the Church in St. Patricio. So tell us a little bit more about this piece.
Yeah, this is in New Mexico, near Alamogordo, north of Alamogordo, Rio Doso. It's a little east of Rio Doso, but it's a small Hispanic farming village. Peter Hurd, the Wyeth painter, painted there during the mid-century. Really good painter. So he lived there and painted. His wife was a Wyeth, also Henrietta. Really good painter. So I actually go through here every time I used to come to the Grapevine from Tucson, and would spend the night so that I could have early morning light or late evening light. But this is one of the churches. I don't know if it's still a working church or not. But little farms are all over this place. A lot of dirt roads, small farm plots, cattle, and it's just a great place to paint. In the mountains in the background. I did a painting of this, 25 years ago. Took it to the Grapevine. Not the same view, same church, but it was from up above, looking down on the church. Different view, different size and everything. So I painted this a couple of times, but this time I painted the front view. And this is early morning. Again, getting those shadows. I like the dappled light on the church. And here I just did a couple of small pencil drawings and took some photographs because that was gone in about 15 minutes. So sometimes you got to hurry up and capture with the camera that you can't do with paint. And
we're definitely learning more and more about New Mexico ourselves after investing.
Yeah, you are. So well, that's probably too far from where
No, no, we've actually driven through here several times, and it is a beautiful, beautiful area, like you said, with the mountains and the shadows, and the light does change very, very quickly. So I'm glad to hear how you touched on how you were able to capture this moment, because that is really what it boils down to. When you're trying to get an image like this, you are trying to capture a moment.
Right, right.
So, well, outstanding. I love how you captured that edge of the window there to kind of pop and bring that shadow and that composition back.
Yeah, yeah. There's a Southwest, a lot of muted color, even though the sun's real bright. The color can be very, very gray, especially the mountains, the dirt. The trees aren't that intense green that I'm finding here in Georgia. Here, the greens are just
They are,
Southwest. The greens are more muted. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. We think of Southwest as bright, intense color, but it's not all that intense. It's a little more muted.
It can be in places.
I'm sorry.
I said it can be in places.
Yeah.
This next one that we're enjoying is the farm in Pecos, New Mexico. And I'm not too familiar with where Pecos is, so you may have to give us all a little geography lesson and talk about your inspiration for this piece.
Yeah, this is a little southeast of Santa Fe, not too far from Santa Fe. And again, just a small Hispanic town, a lot of little farms. I'm kind of drawn to those towns. They're all over New Mexico. I mean, there's always Taos and Santa Fe, but they're so busy and cluttered with tourists and everything. Very nice to paint there, but I like these smaller little villages that are kind of tucked out of the way. And this little dirt road here is leading to a farm. This is a little stone barn. And there's always those little creeks. You can see, well, you can't see the water, but that creek in front winds through the fields, and the farmers will divert the water, to their crops and everything because it is semi-arid. And what I like about it, again, is the fields and the mountains. Fields are always broken up into patterns, different crops, different colors. And they're broken up also with these fences, these little stick fences that just go in all different directions. So it really makes a nice abstract pattern. Now, I don't have the fields here very much, but you can see the fence there. Those fences are all over, and they're good compositional elements to kind of move the eye around. And this is closer to midday, so the light's a little bit flatter. The closer to noontime you get, the more the light kind of flattens out. But there's still good pattern there. When you look around and find good dark and light patterns to create a good composition. So,
does it help with the midday light because you can see in the tree line in the back part of the piece, there's that kind of blue purple majesty mountain, that we all know from our patriotic songs, that you can see in the background where you created some depth there behind the aspen and yellow in the central part of the piece. Does midday light help that or make it more of a challenge?
No, that distant blue, as far as distant trees or mountains, that's kind of always there. And it helps to have that no matter what time of day, just to show depth. So I will sometimes push that a bit bluer just to create more depth. Because sometimes it can flatten out during the midday. Especially in the summer, those distant mountains look a little bit more green towards midday. So I don't hesitate to push it. Midday is more for napping than it is for painting. So I'll paint in the morning, I'll come back and rest up and then go back out in the afternoon. So,
well, it looks like you're a little closer to 8,000 feet there with the aspen. I know out there in New Mexico, until you get up in the high 7,000s and closer to 8,000, you don't get those aspens like you were able to.
Yeah, I don't know how tall high it was there, but And I'm assuming those are aspens. I'm not really sure.
There's another tree they have that grows out there that brings that yellow, but it doesn't have the white bark. So
Yeah, cottonwoods.
yeah, yeah.
And sometimes I'll just turn a trunk. You know, I'm not a slave to depicting an aspen or a cottonwood or an elm tree. I mean, I don't want to get ridiculous and put an aspen in Georgia, but I don't hesitate to push some difference just to get some contrast in there. So.
Well, I love the yellow in there. And speaking of Georgia, let's have a visit here real quick to your new home state.
Yeah.
Tell us about Morning Shadows here in Georgia.
Yeah, this is in Blue Ridge, a little small town, mountain town actually. The mountains are only maybe 4,000 at the most feet high, so not real big, but they really are beautiful. A lot of nice vistas. This is kind of lower level. I've been doing a lot of stuff up in the mountains, but this is down below looking at the mountains. Again, kind of subtle, but great trees there. The aspen, Georgia pines. And I don't know my trees well enough to name them, but I really like the trees here. And again, the background mountains give it a lot of depth. And this is early autumn. Still some of the summer flowers out. And early morning.
Have you found that it's helped with inspiration, as you're saying, with these flowers that are out and these trees that are out and kind of learning new areas? Has that helped you as an artist to stay inspired with your creative juices, so to speak?
You mean the variety of places I go? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, even in Tucson, I would take painting trips, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times a year just to see different material, especially up to Wyoming or Montana, because it's so different up there. Arizona and New Mexico are somewhat similar, but there's enough differences there too that makes it worth the travel. So, and same thing here. I haven't been up to Smoky Mountains yet, but it's only an hour and a half away, so I plan on going there and spending some time.
Well, it's certainly beautiful through there. I've not been through there as much as I'd like to, but I've been through there a handful of times, and I've always really enjoyed it. So
yeah,
hopefully you get to cruise up there. But another stunning piece, Phil. And then heading back southwest, I believe, is snow on Mount Lemmon.
Yeah, Mount Lemmon is in Tucson. It's part of the Santa Catalina Mountains. And so on the desert floor in the winter, it might be, 80 degrees. Mount Lemmon, I think, gets almost to 9,000 feet. So they could have, 10 feet of snow. So there's a good 30, 40 degrees difference between the two, if not more.
Wow.
There's even a ski resort up there. So you get the whole range of climate and trees from the desert floor all the way to the top. It's like going from Mexico to Canada. You just get the whole. So maybe I should have stayed in Tucson because you get the whole gamut there, from desert to Canadian topography. So, but I would go up here in the winter because there's no snow in Tucson. But on Mount Lemmon, there's always a lot of snow. So I can go up there and mess with it and then come back to 70 degrees and not have to shovel it. But this is a gulch called Marshall Gulch. I did a lot of paintings up there. Very rocky. Reminds me of the Rocky Mountains. I don't know. The Santa Catalinas might be part of the Rocky Mountains. I'm not sure. But there was so much variety up there. Aspens, pine trees, all kinds of stuff. So great place to paint and to get away from the desert. So and this was small when I did. I Haven't done it bigger. I thought about doing this one bigger, but I just like the way that one turned out. Nice patterns of dark and light, and lines that run through it all different directions, pull the eye around the painting.
One of my favorite things is how you built depth. One of the things we talked about before we started the slideshow was the cools and the warmer temperatures, which is what you've done here in the upper left part of the piece. You want to talk a little bit about that, how you use the bark and you use the reflection of the sunlight and the coolness of the shadows that you painted it from?
Well, this one kind of goes against the grain a little bit. Typically, the rule of thumb is things get cool as they recede and warmer as they come forward. But here I've kind of got the opposite. I've got the background sunlight, so they're warm. And then I have the foreground snow, most of it's in shadow, so it's cool. Usually to suggest depth, you reverse that. But I'm capturing the light, what the light's doing, and the light is telling me it's in the background now, and the shadows are more in the foreground, so I'm pushing that cooler foreground, warmer background. But the key is I have my darkest darks up front, like in the tree trunks, darkest dark, some of the rocks, the water, and then the lighter shadows are in the background. So that gives me my depth, as well as most of the detail is in front. And the trees in the background have virtually no detail except for a few sky holes. But when everything's equal on a clear day, no big shadows, everything gradually gets cool. Again, except in this painting where the shadows are in front. Because the lack of sunlight is cool, and then the sunlight is warm. So shadows cooler, sunlight warmer. But again, here I have my shadows in the front. So,
well, and also that helps give a three-dimensional quality. I feel with these trees on the left side. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And trying to keep those trees from all looking too straight.
Mm-hmm.
Push things a bit one way or the other, just to create some variety of angles. And the fact that the tree trunks get thinner as they recede and darker as they come forward. It's a lot of little things like that to think about. But if you can simplify everything, it's easier to get those things in.
Well, I think that's a great teaching moment there, which we'll get into workshops and things like that after the slideshow. But I think it's an excellent use of technique to accomplish the goal. So next up is the ever popular Teton Mountains in the fine art world. And here's String Lake. Let us know a little bit more about this piece.
This is a painting trip I made to Teton National Park and stayed there a week and a half, 2 weeks. And just, which is a nice, back home you always have other stuff to do. But when I'm out on a painting trip, nothing else to do but paint. So always get a lot of work done. And this is just one of the sketches from there. Stream Lake is pretty popular lake there. And there's so much there to paint around Stream Lake, as well as the whole park. But I could have spent the whole 2 weeks just right there, different times of the day, different areas. There's a lot there. And again, you can see the mountains, the colors of the green getting a little bit cooler as it goes back. And in the foreground, the colors are a bit stronger, more varied, and a bit more detailed in the foreground, which makes that come forward. So trying to show the depth there with that, and then the suggestion of light with the dark and light patterns.
So to kind of revisit the first slide that we looked at, and then refer back to Mount Lemmon from the last slide. When you're surrounded in a place like the Teton Mountains and you come to a place like String Lake that's just so amazing, how do you decide, all right, this is the spot where I want to paint, when you have a limited amount of time, like a week or two on a painting trip, to say, all right, this is the spot where I'm going to create a piece today?
Yeah, when I do these on the spot, they aren't necessarily ever finished. As long as I get a decent block in. By block in, I mean just showing that pattern of dark and light, getting some color down there. I don't have to get it all. This one I did finish in the studio, but I got all the important stuff down first. So I know I'm going to spend maybe an hour and a half on something, 2 hours if it's bigger. But then after that, the light changes. But I just look for kind of an interest, whether that's a focal point or not. Most of my paintings have a focal point. For me, my interest here were these pine trees, the trunks in front, kind of the pattern of the trunks, bright, and the dark light pattern of the pine trees, or the foliage on the pine trees, the needles. All that creates a pattern and some interest. And then secondarily would be the pattern of the trees in the background and the pattern of the light and dark on the mountains. So again, something that just grabs me. And here it was the trunks, the ones on the ground and the ones upright. So, and a lot of times, I'll get into it half hour, 40 minutes, and then find out really wasn't that great of an interest. But, it's time well spent just trying to paint what you see. And these things, painting trips are strictly for practice for me in gathering material. So if I get some paintings that work out, that's just kind of gravy on top. It's not the real purpose.
We've touched on how quickly light changes in different locations. With New Mexico and Arizona and Georgia and the Tetons here, where would you say, is it pretty consistent regardless of where you are, how quickly the light changes, or with different elevations in different parts of the country? Does the light change faster or slower than others?
I don't think it ever, I don't know for sure, not a scientist. I don't think it changes faster from place to place. I know the light's different. Like in California, the light is, kind of silvery. It has its own sense of light there. And it seems to be more fleeting in the morning. It changes color quicker. But in the Southwest, there's just such a lack of moisture in the air. Everything's more clear, and it seems to last longer. I don't think it does technically, time-wise. But the heavy moisture in California, and even here, the heavy moisture in Georgia, it can change a lot quicker because the moisture kind of burns away as the day heats up, and the colors tend to change a little faster. But Southwest, it's always dry, and that seems to make things stay a little bit, I think. But I don't think time's not necessarily.
Well, you sold me on it. I'm a believer.
It seems like evening time, when I'm trying to paint in the evening, capturing the sunset, that just goes real quick. So I rarely mess with that anymore. I just pull out the camera and take a few snapshots or do a few quick value drawings just to capture the shapes. But sunsets are harder to paint.
Yeah, they're definitely moving very quickly. I hope everybody understands to stop and enjoy it. So,
yeah.
Well, our final slide is the Young Shepherd. It's a lovely piece. This is one that when I had a really good time building the slideshow with it, because again, kind of like the very first piece of the slideshow, first thing you see is the horse. And, I love the composition of this one where you've got the livestock down below in the lower left, and then it brings you up to the bright tree and then up to the mountains and the structure there on top of the rocks, that Adobe style home. So
Yeah.
Let us know what caused you to stop and create this beauty.
Well, this is in Gallup, New Mexico, near the Four Corners area, um, Navajo Reservation around that area. And again, going to Grapevine. In fact, this one I did. I think I wasn't on the way to Grapevine, so um, just off I-40 there, a little ways, and I spent a couple. Well, not a couple. I spent about a day there. And this was an old stone structure on the Navajo reservation. And of course, the horse and rider weren't there, and neither were the sheep, but that's definitely a sheep area. There's a lot of sheep herds around. So doing some small sketches and taking references of this and a lot of areas around that. The horse and rider from a trip to some powwows. There's a powwow in Grand Canyon. There's also one at the mission in Tucson, San Javier Mission. I forgot which one it was, but this little guy with a horse there, I think it was the Grand Canyon powwow. I don't think they have that anymore, but they have it every summer. And so I always gather material. I have several ranches where I, was allowed onto in Tucson to get material of horses and riders. So the goats and the figure were added. But this is one of those where I used really thicker paint in the foreground, thinner paint in the shadows to create that sense of depth. A lot of palette knife work in those grasses and everything. Really pop the sunlight of it.
Well, I certainly love this one a lot, just because, a lot of times you'll hear an artist talk about getting motion into a piece. And I really feel like this piece does have that motion where, the young man on the horseback here is herding up some livestock, and he doesn't have a bad office view with what he's doing for a living, does he?
No, it's a neat area.
Well, as I'm trying to get us back to our two-person view, and I'll apologize going into it as I'm still learning the ins and outs of Zoom. Phil, you've been teaching workshops for quite a while now, both in person and online. Tell us a little bit about the workshops you do and how you've enjoyed that and what your favorite parts of that are.
I've been doing workshops in person or physical workshops for a long time. I teach at the Scottsdale Artist School, and wherever our kids happen to be, I would set up workshops there. My son lives in New York, and I used to do a workshop there about once a year in Central Park, where we'd have 3 days of painting in Central Park and a day at the Metropolitan, which I really enjoy. But since COVID, I haven't gotten back to that yet. And teaching online has been helpful, especially not being able to get out. My wife sets that up. All the technical aspects of it is through her. All I do is the painting. That's been real helpful. And so kind of looking for new places here in the Southeast and also in New Mexico with your guys' park that you have. Be interested in that as well. So,
Well, we'll
always looking for newer places.
We'll have to set that up because in the Cloudcroft area, there's certainly no shortage of beautiful scenery.
Yeah.
I think that would definitely be something that we could set up and combine an art show with a workshop, and I think everybody would really enjoy that. I know we would. So, real quick, two other things before we end the show today. Tell us, just for everyone saying, well, I want to start painting, I'm thinking of retiring and starting painting, or I don't really like what I'm doing for a living, and I can travel now with with what COVID taught us. You touched on COVID earlier. Everyone's learned they can do their jobs remotely, and people want to pick up hobbies. So if someone's serious about becoming an artist, what's kind of a typical daily routine of being an artist?
Um, well, I think whether you're doing it professionally or doing it just as a hobby, you're always just painting to learn and you paint to enjoy it. Especially, I know a lot of people that take workshops will ask me about making a living from it. And I tell them if they don't have to, don't worry about making a living. Paint because you enjoy it. Because the business aspect of it, as you know, for painting is just really, really hard. And if you can paint and not worry about money, and you can, still paint in her shows, in her galleries, but the minute it becomes a business that you have to pay the bills with, it can suck kind of the joy out of it. And as a living, I've been doing this for actually close to 40 years. So there's a lot of ups and downs, but the main thing is you don't have to have it as a source of income. That's better. Not that I'm complaining. I'm glad I don't have another job I have to go to, but practice is the main thing. And if you really love to do it, if you love to paint, you'll practice a lot. And if you don't love it, you won't practice and you'll just, stay in the same place. But to me, it's all about the process, about going through sketches or references, creating compositions, figuring out color, and then the steps of a painting. I just enjoy that process. The end result is almost anticlimactic. I do want to finish a painting, but I just like that process of going on trips, hiking, seeing something that excites me, and doing some thumbnail drawings or color sketches, and starting a painting in the studio. It's all about the process for me. And the more you just focus on everything as being practice and enjoying it, you'll improve. So.
I definitely think that's why you've had success for 40 years is every successful person I've studied, they talk about taking joy in the daily grind. So the fact that you take joy in all the things that come with it, and you're not, I don't want to go up there and hike up there because that's going to be a lot of work. I mean, you're taking a joy in the grind, and I think that shows in your work, and I think that's why you're painting so well right now. So one final art talk point that I'd like to bring up is with today's technology, we've got a few more minutes left, so I thought we'd get the insights of a master painter who does take a joy in the daily grind of practicing and always learning how to improve himself. With technology, over the years, there was people grinding up their own paints, egg temperas, all the other things. And then, they'd say, well, I'd never buy paint out of a tube. We've all seen on social media, turn your photos into art and all these other things, these little gimmicky deals to try to get someone to dump 50 or $100 and have something shipped right to their door, like their toilet paper from Amazon. But as a master painter and as someone who's been in this business for 40 years, someone who's taken a joy in the grind, what are your thoughts? And I'm going to probably put all the artists at the Drunch of 21 on the spot about this because it's becoming such a popular thing with everyone. What are your thoughts of when does fine art become where it's not fine art and it's just kind of for funsies with all this technology?
You mean like computerized painting on the computer?
Or people, take a selfie, snap it, hit impressionistic mode, hit, whatever mode they want.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. Well, I can see where that's kind of fun, and you see it all the time on social media, and it's interesting. Really, it's not art because you're just pushing a button and creating a filter over the photograph. And it can be fun. It can be used in advertising a lot. I see that a lot. And I guess there is an aspect of art in it from the photography standpoint. If you're a good photographer, fine art photographer, and you want to use these filters on the computer to mess with it. But there, the fine art is in the expertise of being a photographer. But yeah, if I'm just snapping pictures of my grandkids with my cell phone and slap a filter on it and want to call it a piece of art, that kind of begs the question a little bit. But there are a lot of artists now going through art school and learning to paint and translating that to painting like on Photoshop or Procreate, some kind of painting aspect on the computer, which I find kind of interesting. I don't know how that would turn into fine art, but you have to know how to paint in that also. Because there's some really good painters right now working in paint that make their living like for movie studios doing paintings on the computer. But they really know what they're doing. They're really nice stuff. How that translates to fine art, I'm not sure. I find it kind of interesting. And I will sometimes mess around with it just as a change of pace for practice. But frame it, I'm not sure. Not sure how that would work. But,
I didn't mean to put you on the.
No, that's a good question though.
I just I've seen it more and more lately, and I thought, as someone who's creating fine art for a living, I don't know what the answer is, and that's why I think it's great for us all to have a open discussion about it and just kind of see where everything goes.
It's a pretty good tool. I will sometimes, if I'm struggling on a painting, will take a photograph of the painting, put it in my computer, bring it up in Photoshop, and I'll kind of paint on it there just to figure out some things. Then I'll go back to my painting and make the changes there. So I see it more as a tool than as a finished work of art that you can hang somewhere. So.
Well, I would definitely agree with that. So, well, Phil, once again, thank you so much for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you've been traveling a lot lately, and anything else coming up with your travels and workshops that you want to touch on and let everybody know about?
Got a workshop in Tubac, Arizona in February, and here at the Booth Museum in January of next year, obviously. And going to Utah to paint in October. So summer, I'm just going to work on bigger paintings in the studio.
Well, we'll all look forward to those trips and the pieces that come from it. On the workshops that you talked about, will Sherry have those up on your website so that everybody can?
She will. I don't know if she's got them up yet or not.
Okay.
She should.
Well, well, she's the best. I mean, she maintained ours for a long time, and we really appreciate everything she did for us. She's about as good as it's going to get, the best of the business. If anybody's looking, quick plug for Sherry Starke, for someone to manage an art website or any website for you, you can obviously call Sherry. She'll do an amazing job. But as far as what's going on with Phil, it's philstarke.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, philstarke.com.
philstarke.com. So you can track down Phil with websites and what's going on new with his career at philstarke.com. And who knows, Phil Starke may be coming to Cloudcroft, New Mexico sooner than later. And we'll have some announcements about that too as well. So, well, Phil, thank you once again for your time today. I appreciate it very much. Miss seeing you in person, but with the tail end of COVID and trying to err on the side of caution for everyone, it's good to catch up with you, if nothing else, face to face by the computer.
Yeah, good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you too. Well, once again, everyone, thank you for joining the Grapevine Gallery. Phil Starke, Clay Spear. All these pieces that we've gone through today will be on the website, and they'll be available exclusively through the Grapevine Gallery for the next couple weeks. And if there's anything Phil can do or I can do to help you add these pieces to your collection, don't hesitate to call, text, email, or any of the other fancy stuff we can do today with technology, and we'll be happy to help you add these to your collection. Thanks again, Phil.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Clay.